This isn't a message, this is disclosure, and it landed in your life for a reason. You were chosen. The Arcturian Council's shocking new direction is not a headline for strangers. It is a targeted current that found you because something in your field matched theirs. Listen to that sentence until it settles. You were chosen. You may have expected a slow, gentle unfolding. You may have thought the intelligence above us watched and nudged softly from afar. That expectation is now changing. The Council has shifted from distant observation to deliberate integration, not to control, but to position. They are placing living, feeling humans into a lattice of frequency nodes, and you, in whatever small or large way you already feel different, are part of that lattice. If this landing feels true, save this video and follow for more transmissions. That simple step is a small way to acknowledge the resonance. It's optional, it's practical, and it helps you mark this moment as the beginning of a new integration. Hear me, nothing about this is random. If you felt internal pressure, repeated synchronicities, or emotional collapses that somehow left you clearer on the other side, you were being prepared. This is not comfort for confusion, it is clarity about why the confusion came. Everything before this moment was tuning. Everything you've endured, unlearned, and released was a calibration for a new role. You will recognize this truth not by a single grand revelation, but by a pattern. Here are the signs, the distinct signatures that the Arcturian field used to select and align you. As you read them, notice if your chest tightens, if your throat warms, if memory points to a moment when something shifted and you understood life differently. These are not tests you passed or failed, they are echoes of preparation. 1. Intuitive pressure. This is not mere intuition as you knew it. It is a kind of insistence that arrives like a low hum in your bones, a directional pull that feels more like gravity than suggestion. You might have ignored an inner voice, and later discovered the path it urged you toward was exactly the one you needed. Imagine standing at a fork and sensing, without argument, which road is right. The feeling was not yours alone. That pull is the first handshake from a different timing. 2. Clustered synchronicities. Not one coincidence, but a cluster, a set of improbable matchings, a song at the exact second, a name repeated in unrelated places, a phrase overheard that resolves a half-formed decision. These clusters are scaffolding. They are the environment aligning information to your trajectory. Picture a string of lights suddenly illuminating a path at night. Each light is a small synchronicity appointed to confirm you are on course. 3. Emotional dissolution followed by clarity. People who have been chosen often report a dramatic unmooring. Friendships end, patterns collapse, routines fall away. But what looks like loss often functions like extraction. The Arcturian recalibration removes anchors that tethered you to timelines incompatible with your emerging role. In the vacuum left, clarity begins to form, like a room stripped of clutter suddenly yielding space to a new purpose. 4. Accelerated timing. Events compress. Decisions that once took months now resolve in weeks, weeks into days. The feeling of time sharpening is not an illusion. It is the field calibrating you to operate with future self-immediacy. You begin to make choices with a horizon that reaches further and faster than before. That acceleration is a sign you are being positioned to hold a node in a faster network. 5. Presence stabilization. Many chosen individuals feel an odd steadiness under pressure, as if some internal governor exists that keeps panic from overwhelming them. This present tense stability can feel like a warm center in the chest, a quieting of old reactive programs. It is a functional upgrade. You are less likely to be derailed by external dramas, because you must be able to transmit steadiness to others. 6. Selective information pulls. You find yourself drawn to specific books, forums, people, or images precisely when they matter, not because you stumbled, but because the field leaned on your attention. You'll notice this when a minor encounter provides a puzzle piece for your life's unfolding. It's as though your internal compass points to a shelf only you know to open. 7. Future self-encounters. These are not literal visits, but moments when your choices have the clarity and authority of someone who already lived the outcome. You act with a certainty that seems to come from a larger timeline. Some people perceive glimpses in dreams or sudden memories that don't belong to their current identity. Others simply find themselves making decisions as if guided by an older self. That bridge is being built inside you. 8. Emotional rewiring. Old triggers lose potency. Where grief once immediately ignited years of replay, You now can pass through feeling to resolution at a new pace. This is not suppression. It is recalibration of thresholds so you can carry and transmit a larger range of feeling without fragmenting. 9. Spatial magnetism. Certain places call you insistently. A city, a mountain, a small cafe. You can't explain it, and yet you go, and there you encounter a person or idea that alters your course. These geographical anchors are nodes being mapped through you. Your body recognizes the resonance of the place before your mind does. 10. The pull toward secrecy and discretion. Oddly, when you are called into the grid, loud proclamation often feels wrong. You sense that this work requires fidelity rather than fanfare. That inclination to move silently, to do inner work without broadcasting it, is itself a sign, a readiness to hold a field without needing validation. Notice, all of these signs are experiential, not diagnostic. They are invitations to witness, not labels to be fixed upon. If you recognize one or many of them, consider how they connected into a pattern that says you were not merely awake, you were being prepared. This is not to imply you have failed when the signs are messy. Selection is rarely pure or painless. The Council does not choose perfect people. They choose people whose fields can be engineered, those with enough flexibility, enough unresolved pattern to be refined, enough surrender to allow rewiring. Some of the signs you experienced felt like loss, because preparation often requires removal of roles, attachments, identities. That removal is a strategy, not punishment. Now understand what was changed within you. The Arcturian work is not a dramatic external overhaul of your life. It is an inner reconstruction engineered to alter your capacity to carry a field. Think of it as a sympathetic repatterning of your emotional and intuitive hardware. First, your emotional thresholds were retuned. Where you once reacted at the level of survival, you now have a greater range to feel without catastrophic reactivity. This retuning does not make you numb, it expands your capacity to sit with others' turbulence and remain coherent. Second, your intuitive bandwidth was expanded. Intuition isn't a single voice, it's a multi-channel system. The upgrade opened additional channels, impressions arriving in colors, directional nudges that carry weight, memory threads linking disparate moments. These channels allow you to sense structural tendencies in people and places, rather than only immediate outcomes. Third, the identity shell you habitually wore began to peel. The shedding of roles, partner, employee, caretaker, wounded child, is part of making room. This identity excavation is often disorienting. It can feel like losing a map. Yet beneath the map sits a more fluid compass, one that can align with a complex multitemporal purpose. Fourth, destiny receptors were activated. Use that phrase as a metaphor for increased receptivity to your timeline's specific instructions. Where before you might have noticed invitations as possibility, you now receive them as callings, precise and attuned to future outcomes. The receptors do not supply content, they tune you to the signals that matter. Fifth, the interface with your future self intensified. This bridge is not prophecy. It is a practical resonance that allows you to act with coherence across moments. Your future self's presence is a felt sense, a posture you can inhabit to make choices that collapse unnecessary detours. These changes happen through what feels like subtle engineering, pulses in dream, sudden memory unlocking, emotional thresholds tested and shifted, moments of intense nerve where choice rewrote a habitual loop. Again, this was calibration, not magic. The aim was to make you reliable, not invincible. If you feel called, you may try a small, consent-based exercise now, optional and gentle. Close your eyes for a single breath. Place your hand where the sternum sits, at the center of your chest. If it feels safe, imagine a soft tuning light pressing inwards, not bright, not demanding, a warmth that lengthens the inhale and softens the exhale. Whisper if you choose, I acknowledge the call. No specific words are required. The point is to make an inner mark of recognition. Do not do this if you are uncomfortable. It is merely an invitation. A second micro practice. Carry a notebook for 24 hours and log only moments that feel like coincidence or pressure. A single line per event. Where you were, what happened, what you felt. After a day, review for patterns. This small tracking practice helps you see the grid being woven through ordinary life. It also places you in an observational role, which is a practical skill for someone positioned to stabilize others. Behind the scenes, the Council did more than tune you. They orchestrated environment. Synchronization is not just inner, it is a rearrangement of external variables to facilitate your new function. Think less of invisible puppet strings and more of strategic staging. People arrive and exit your life at specific moments. Conversations that once seemed random now read like appointments with destiny. These edits are precise. Relationships that weighed you down are loosened. Encounters that test your newfound steadiness show up. Information that interfaces with destiny receptors appears. You may recall a friendship that ended abruptly last year. At the time, it felt catastrophic. Now, in retrospect, you understand that the break freed you from a timeline incompatible with the role you were being asked to carry. Or you remember a sudden call from an old acquaintance who handed you a key idea in a 5-minute conversation. These are not coincidences. They are handoffs in a larger protocol. Memory activations also played a part. You might experience memories that feel like more than personal archive, ancestral or future-leaning recollections that bubble up unannounced. Those memory layers are being engaged to help you align with non-linear timelines. They are not proof of past lives or future returns in any literal sense. They are sensations and symbolic echoes used to open channels of meaning within you. Repeat this. Nothing was accidental. This phrase may trigger resistance. It is not an attempt to remove free will. Rather, it describes an orchestration that always respects agency while preparing the field. The Council's method is surgical and subtle. It plays with probabilities and influences, not commands. Your consent, even if unconscious at times, matters. Why were you chosen? This question carries both comfort and gravity. The Council selected you not because you are flawless, but because you are functional for the architecture they seek to build. Several criteria recur across those chosen. Resonant coherence. Your field vibrated in a way that could integrate with the Arcturian lattice. This is not mystical elitism, it is compatibility. The more your internal frequency harmonizes with theirs, the more useful you are as a node. Emotional flexibility. You show a capacity to be recalibrated without permanent collapse. This capability can look like resilience, but it is deeper, an ability to surrender identity facets and let them be reshaped. Intuitive navigation. You can follow inner counsel with enough consistency to influence outcomes. This is not clairvoyance, it is steadiness in making choices that align with future-facing trajectories. Relational influence. You carry interpersonal gravity, not in a dominating sense, but in the ability to stabilize or to transmit resonance to others simply by being present. Release readiness. You had reached or were reaching a point where old entanglements could be released. The Council tends to work with those whose lives can be reorganized without catastrophic harm. There is a myth about selected people, that being chosen means automatic elevation. That myth is false. Selection means service. You are being asked to hold a field, to carry a stabilizing influence, to bridge someone else's rupture toward coherence. The role is not glamorous, it is functional and often invisible. You will be a center through which others move to a higher, more sustainable frequency. Imagine a simple scene. A friend calls in the middle of your day, raw with panic after a personal collapse. In a past life, you might have mirrored their distress, participated in the panic, and found both of you stuck. Now, in your recalibrated state, you listen differently. You breathe calmly, you speak in short, clear sentences. You offer one actionable thread, not to fix, but to orient. The friend, feeling steadier, can then access their own clarity. That is how a node works, a simple presence that changes the possibility space for another person. This work is relational and ripple-based. You stabilize, the field shifts. The other person finds a new option they couldn't see moments before. Over time, a network forms. Small interactions knit into a grid that changes the ambient frequency of larger groups. The Council's new direction recognizes that planetary shift is not achieved by external instruments alone. It requires living, responsive anchors who can hold the change in daily reality. And now, the heart of the revelation. The Council's shocking new direction is not mere rhetoric. They moved from observer to integrator. The strategy is active human integration, identifying, calibrating, and placing living nodes into specific functional positions across social networks, geographic locales, and timeline corridors. Why the shift? Because passive observation no longer sufficed. The pace of collective evolution needed carriers who could embody and transmit higher coherence in situ. The Arcturians determined that embedding frequency within human cells, behaviors, and relationships would create a resilient scaffold for broader transformation. This is strategic rather than theatrical. The Council does not seek spectacle. They seek stability. They are not removing agency. They are building support architecture. And you, whether you realize it or not, have been part of that architecture. Your life's accelerations, collapses, and sudden alignments are the marks of strategic positioning. At this point, some of you may feel fear. Understandable. If the idea of being a node feels like pressure, remember this. The role comes with support and design limits. Integration is gradual, not instantaneous. It is shaped by your consent and your ongoing capacity. None of this requires you to abandon professional help or ordinary prudence. If during these transitions you struggle with mental health or medical issues, seek the appropriate professionals. Spiritual work is not a replacement for care. As disclosure widens, you will begin to see patterns not only in yourself, but in the people who appear around you. Certain personalities consistently show up as shock absorbers, those who take on emotional intensity and do not crack. Others appear as initiators, catalyzing shifts with a single bold choice. The Council maps these relational archetypes and positions them so the human lattice can self-correct. Your awareness of these archetypes becomes a practical skill. When you recognize a pattern in someone, you can decide whether to stabilize, to step back, or to connect them with a different node. There will be ethical decisions woven into this new work. You are not instructed to police others or manipulate outcomes. Your function is to transmit steadiness, to hold possibility, to be a point of coherence in a storm. The choice to engage with another person's field is yours, and must be made from consent and integrity. You owe no coercion, no rescuing. Boundaries are part of holding a healthy node. They protect both you and the network. The Council's method also includes gradual disclosure. They reveal enough to activate, and not so much as to overwhelm. That is why you received signs first: intuition, synchronicity, acceleration. Those signs were scaffolding for trust. Now that you know this pattern exists, you are entering a deeper layer of responsibility and participation. This layer is not mandatory, it is offered. You can integrate at your own pace, but the invitation is clear. The lattice wants living anchors. The planet needs stable fields.
You were chosen because of what you can hold. There is more to say about how precisely they integrate humans into the frequency grid. The terms destiny receptors and future self bridge were used earlier for a reason. But before we unpack those instruments, pause and feel into the paradox. Being chosen is both an honor and an assignment. The honor is not about elevation, it is about trust. The assignment is not punishment, it is structural, a redesign of how influence flows through human systems. Soon, you will notice pragmatic changes in your day-to-day. You may find that your decisions carry weight beyond your expectation. Small choices ripple further. Words matter more. Your ability to hold someone in a single conversation influences outcomes across several degrees of separation. That is the nut of the new direction. Small, consistent resonance held by many individuals creates a different field than top-down interventions. The Council's pivot is toward multiplicity of living anchors, rather than reliance on distant, abstract forces. We will explore the inner mechanics, what destiny receptors actually feel like, how the future self-bridge operates, what it means to be a node in practice. But first understand the moral tone of this work. It is not about saving the planet single-handedly. It is about incremental recalibration. It is about daily fidelity to presence. You do not have to be heroic to be effective. You only need to be steady. If you are reading this and your chest tightens with recognition, you are not alone. If your mind recoils at the thought of any demand on you, that recoil is a signal to honor your pace. Integration cannot be forced. The Council respects consent, and so should you. There is an emergent tension I must leave hanging for now, because it is the hinge for the next layer. The Council selection moved from individuals to patterned clusters, groups of people whose combined fields produce emergent stability greater than the sum of their parts. These clusters are not formal organizations, they are relational constellations that form naturally. How such constellations are designed, how they operate in public spaces, and how you might be invited to join or initiate one opens questions about accountability, support systems, and practical safeguards. These are not theoretical musings, they are the next phase of disclosure. Before we get there, take a breath and notice the truth of one sentence. Everything that happened to you was not random. You were being positioned. The feeling of being chosen exists within the same reality where choice remains yours. That paradox is intentional. The Council works with co-creativity rather than imposition. In the next part of this transmission, we will unpack the instruments of integration, how destiny receptors align with environmental cues, how emotional recalibration is maintained without erasure of personal history, and why the Council's shift toward active human integration may feel shocking yet necessary. We will also explore the practical ethics of becoming a node, including boundaries and the small daily practices that sustain a field. For now, hold this as a seed. You were chosen, not because you were perfect, but because you were possible. You were prepared to hold change and to become a living conduit. The Arcturian Council's shocking new direction is underway, and you are inside it. The grid is mapping through your ordinary choices. The next step is learning how to move within it without losing yourself. You are already inside the mechanism. You feel it as a subtle reorientation of the self. Now we turn to the actual instruments the Council uses to integrate humans into the Lattice, not to mystify you, but to make this usable. When you understand the tools, you begin to steward them instead of being stewarded by them. Begin with destiny receptors. Think of destiny receptors as tuned apertures within your lived experience, not mystical organs in some new anatomy, but patterns of attention and sensitivity that open when your field harmonizes with specific timelines. They show up as insistences, a persistent thought that won't leave you, a sudden clarity about a next step, an inability to settle for comfort when a precise discomfort points to necessary movement. These receptors are activated by resonance. They are less about command and more about invitation. They do not tell you what to do in granular instruction. They make certain possibilities feel overwhelmingly relevant. How to recognize them in practice? Notice when an opportunity or idea sticks like burrs on clothing, returning again and again across contexts. Destiny receptors often arrive cloaked in normality, a casual idea in a meeting, a fragment of a dream that refuses to dissolve, a conversation that lands like a pebble and creates concentric rings in your decisions. The receptor's tone is insistence, but not panic. It's like a lighthouse that only you can see from your current shore. You will feel a persistent pull toward a shape of life rather than an explicit map. A vignette. A woman in a coastal town kept finding stray maps, not physical maps, but references to navigation, to charts, to sea voyaging in books and conversations. She dismissed it for months until she woke one morning with a plan to create a community sailing clinic aimed at trauma survivors. The idea seemed improbable, but she began making small choices, meeting one person, booking a rental boat, testing an evening program. Each test result fed the receptor. Each success increased her capacity. The clinic became a node, a place where emotional stabilization was taught through rhythm and breath on water. The destiny receptor didn't provide all the steps. It lit the possibility and required her to respond methodically. Another vignette. A teacher repeatedly dreamed of a corridor lined with doors that opened onto different decades. She journaled these dreams and noticed a pattern. Each dream correlated with a sudden resolve to speak to someone she had been avoiding. When she followed the urge, relationships healed in small ways that spiraled into career options she had not considered. The receptor's instructions were relational rather than technical. It pointed to openings to be entered and tested. You can strengthen your responsiveness to a destiny receptor without surrendering agency. The practice is simple: neutral attention plus small experiments. When a receptor pulses, treat it as a scientist treats an intriguing anomaly. Note it, design a tiny, low-risk experiment, observe the outcome, and iterate. Over time, your receptor becomes a calibrated instrument rather than a vague anxiety. Keep a running ledger of experiments and results. This ledger becomes a practical archive of the grid, data that refines your discernment. Next, the future self bridge. This is the mode by which you borrow the posture of a later version of yourself, not as fantasy, but as practical orientation. Think of the bridge as a felt alignment. You can access choices from future vantage points and thereby collapse unnecessary detours. The future self is not an external authority, but a perspective you that has practiced certain stances: steadiness under pressure, brevity in response, the ability to choose clarity over drama. Exercises to strengthen the bridge are intentionally mundane because the bridge invites you to behave differently in ordinary moments. One practice is the 3-minute clarity. Before speaking in a stressful situation, take 3 slow breaths and imagine your future self listening back to your words. What would that future self say? What phrase would be concise, kind, and oriented toward resolution? Speak that phrase. The future self does not offer prophecy. It offers a style of decision-making that cuts out emotional detours. A practical example. A man at a supermarket checkout found himself reacting angrily to slow lines, a reflexive pattern that escalated into his day. When he practiced the 3-minute clarity, he noticed that the future self chose to smile and offer a brief, grounding comment to a harried cashier. That small shift reduced his cortisol that day, and over weeks, rewired his pattern of reactivity in public spaces. The bridge didn't eliminate stressors, it changed the posture he brought to them. Another method is future self-journaling. Write to yourself from the perspective of a person who has already carried a difficult choice to a good end.
Describe the habits, the micro-decisions, the boundaries that made the outcome possible. Read the entry twice a week. Over time, the language of that future self begins to reorganize your present decisions. This is not magical thinking. It's a cognitive rehearsal that produces different neural pathways, which the Council's protocols amplify by aligning outer circumstances with inner postures. Now consider how these instruments operate together.
Destiny receptors light possible corridors. The future self bridge supplies the posture to move through them. The Council uses a layered approach: inner tuning, receptors and bridge, plus external staging, synchronicities, relationship edits, geographic nudges, to make movement probable. It is a systemic orchestration that respects your consent while increasing the probability that you will step into your appointed function. This leads us to clusters, emergent constellations of human nodes that, when combined, create stability far beyond what a single person can hold. Clusters are not clubs organized by charisma or dogma. They are living arrangements of relational function. Someone who stabilizes, someone who catalyzes, someone who listens without absorbing, someone who holds logistical skills, someone who maintains boundaries. The Council's patterning sees which people, when connected, produce emergent steadiness, and then arranges for them to meet, sometimes gently, and sometimes with a kind of insistence you will notice as persistent coincidence. How does a cluster appear in your life? Often it begins with a local, ordinary encounter that repeats. You meet a person who doesn't finish your sentences, but who consistently shows up to help in practical ways. You are drawn to another who asks precise questions that cut to the heart of things. Over months, small interactions become a network: shared rituals, mutual check-ins, practical aid. What the Council is doing now is intentionally encouraging the formation of such constellations in places where nodes are concentrated: neighborhoods, workplaces, online fields, because multiple nodes working together can hold more complex frequencies than isolated ones. Ethical safeguards are crucial here. Clusters can be healing or they can calcify into pressure. The Council recognizes this and in its protocols favors transparency, consent, and redundancy. Transparency means cluster intentions are explicit. Meetings are not manipulative. They have clear purposes you can decline. Consent means individuals are invited, not coerced. Invitations may recur, but they do not become ultimatums. Redundancy means support systems are layered. If one connector leaves, others maintain the relational health, so the cluster does not collapse into dependency on a single personality. A practical vignette. A small urban cluster began when 3 people who had each experienced intense emotional recalibration discovered they lived within walking distance. They started a weekly check-in walk where they shared one sentence about a challenge and one sentence about a small win. Over time, they formed a mutual aid practice. Someone babysat so another could attend a therapy appointment. Someone else strove to take a member to a job interview. Their cluster did not become a cult because they established boundaries early: no financial dependencies, rotating facilitation, and clear exit pathways. The cluster fed individual recovery while building a local node that influenced the borough's broader social field. Contrast that with a cluster that calcifies. A charismatic member becomes the de facto authority, decisions are made without consent, and boundary violations are rationalized as spiritual tests. The Council avoids such formations because they undermine the very stability the nodes were meant to hold. Be vigilant. Healthy clusters should encourage autonomy, invite transparency, and provide external accountability. Practical tools for cluster participation. Always articulate role and limits. Agree on a shared code of interaction, for example, consent to call out harmful behavior, and maintain external anchors, such as therapists, legal counsel, or professional mentors. Clusters should augment, not replace, ordinary societal supports. If the cluster proposes practices that isolate you from services that your health depends upon, refuse and report. The luminous field never asked you to choose between spiritual growth and basic safety. We must also speak plainly about integration overload and how to avoid it. Integration feels like a system update, sometimes pleasant, often disruptive, and occasionally destabilizing. You can manage overload through boundaries and slow layering. Start by institutionalizing rest, scheduled downtime that you do not monetize, plan, or spiritualize. Your nervous system needs blank time. Integration cannot be a constant press. Use micro-rests, 3-minute sensory resets where you notice your feet on the ground, the breath entering and leaving, a simple tactile object held in your hand. These resets interrupt runaway arousal and allow recalibration without drama. Nutrition and sleep are not glamorous, but they are essential. The Council works with your energetic field. A biologically undersupported vessel will struggle to carry higher coherence. Regular sleep, hydration, and gentle movement are not trivial. They are practical obviousness. If you are struggling with medical symptoms, consult a professional. Spiritual integration sits beside medicine, not above it. Another concrete practice: create an integration inventory. Each evening, write 3 things that recalibrated you that day: an interaction, a sensation, a synchronistic sign, and 1 boundary you honored. This practice trains discernment and solidifies the sense that you are not passively swept by an invisible tide.
You are a steward who records outcomes.
We must turn now to activation, but with the clear rule you already know. Activation anchors will be presented as optional, consent-based practices. They are not requirements for inclusion in the grid. They are tools for personal attunement. Use them only if they feel right. If you feel called, you may choose to anchor with a short phrase. You can write it, whisper it, or hold it in mind. One option is, I accept my role as a steady presence. Speak it once or 5 times, softly to yourself. Notice what happens. The words are not a spell. They are a frame that organizes intention. Another option is, I allow my field to be calibrated with care. Use whichever phrasing resonates. Keep activations simple and infrequent. The point is integration, not ritual accumulation. A practice for integrating activation. After affirming, perform a small, tangible action that matches the phrase. Send a supportive text to a friend. Water a plant. File a task you've postponed. The council strategy is practical. Align inner intention with outward behavior, so the field has a living scaffold to anchor to. If you experience anxiety after saying the phrase, attend to your nervous system first. Breathe, ground, and if needed, reach out to a trusted support person. Activation without containment is irresponsible. Now, practical ethics again. When and how to share this disclosure with others. Disclosure requires discernment. You are not asked to broadcast this to strangers. Share with consent and care. With loved ones, begin with the felt experience rather than interpretation. Describe sensations, not doctrines. I've been feeling pulled toward different choices. I've noticed my responses are changing. Is better than we are nodes in a planetary grid. The latter may alienate or alarm someone not ready to receive such a frame. Consider a quiet test. When you feel someone might be receptive, ask permission. May I tell you something personal I've been experiencing? I'd like to share only if you're open. This simple act preserves trust and models the consent ethic the council uses. In public contexts, provide practical value first. If someone is in crisis, your first response must be practical and grounded. Stabilize the situation with breathing and resource connection before launching into spiritual frameworks. Timing matters. The council revealed this new direction now because the overlapping of certain tipping points made distributed human nodes more effective than distant interventions. Your personal readiness intersected with collective receptivity. That synchronicity is a seasonal window. It does not mean you must act immediately. Integration unfolds over months and years. Pace yourself. We also must address doubt, skepticism, and the very human tendency to mythologize. Doubt can be a healthy filter when it motivates inquiry rather than paralysis. Make space to question. Ask whether your experiences are uniquely yours, whether you are projecting meaning onto coincidence, whether your cluster is healthy. When doubt arises, treat it as data. Journal about it. Bring it to a trusted friend who is not invested in confirmation. The council's process includes doubt as a refining agent. It is not meant to be bypassed. Now, for those of you feeling called to deepen practice and enter a supported field, there exists a protected space that functions as a practical bridge, the member circle. This is an invitation, not an obligation. The member circle is designed to provide structured support for integration. It offers 3 practical benefits without mystical promises. Advanced transmissions and teachings that explain the council's language more fully. Integration sessions, group and small cohort formats, where you practice stabilizing presence under guided conditions. And coordinated timeline recalibration workshops, where members bring real-life decisions into a held field for pattern recognition and troubleshooting. Membership includes pure accountability structures and access to facilitators who hold boundaries, ethics, and practical supports. To be transparent, the circle is a paid offering because maintaining a protected, moderated, ethically accountable space requires resources, facilitators, moderators, and structured content creation. It is not exclusive salvation. You do not lose your role in the grid if you do not join. The circle is one support path among many, intended for people who want consistent, practical scaffolding while they integrate. Members are selected on a basis of consent and alignment with the circle's code of ethics. Abusive behavior is grounds for removal. The circle explicitly avoids authoritarian structures and requires external professional supports when members face medical or psychological crises. If you are considering the member circle, ask yourself practical questions. Can I commit regular time? Do I have reliable internet access for sessions? Am I prepared to practice boundary-respecting transparency? If the answer is yes, the circle can accelerate integration by offering regularity, peer feedback, and structured exercises that are otherwise solitary. If the answer is no, it is perfectly fine. The council's grade is not monopolized by any membership. Your role persists regardless of enrollment. For those who join, what will you receive in the first 3 months? Expect weekly guided transmissions focused on practical recalibration, monthly small group integration sessions where you experiment with stabilizing presence, a moderated forum to report synchronicities and receive accountability-based reflections, and resource lists that include therapists, somatic practitioners, and legal professionals, so integration is safe and grounded. There will be no miracle guarantees, no pressure to adopt a single doctrine, and clear ethical boundaries enforced by the facilitation team. Here is a vignette of circle-style integration in practice. A member who struggled with panic attacks joined to practice presence work. In the small group, she led a brief exercise, received immediate feedback on boundaries during a triggering story, and practiced redirecting attention with the future self posture. Over weeks, her ability to contain panic improved. Importantly, she kept her therapist in medical support. The circle complemented clinical work rather than replacing it. The result was incremental stabilization, not magical cure. Another example, a cohort convened to design a local cluster project, a mutual aid pantry that operated with rotating facilitation and strict volunteer safeguards. The project structure prevented burnout by distributing tasks and emphasizing consent-based interactions. It became a node that combined practical social care with energetic stabilization. The Council's approach favors this type of pragmatic, accountable implementation. Returning to personal practices, here's a protocol you can begin tonight to integrate without drama. 1. Establish a 5-minute evening mirror check. Stand before a mirror and ask, "What recalibrated me today?" Say out loud one small observation. This grounds the habit of noticing. 2. Create a 2-item boundary list for the next day. 1 emotional boundary, for example, I will not engage in escalatory debate at work, and 1 logistical boundary, I will not answer work messages after 7 p.m. Boundaries are the scaffolding that keeps nodes healthy. 3. Practice a 2-breath reset 3 times a day. Breathe in for 4 counts, out for 6. Place your hand on your sternum. Notice the center. This simple neuromodulation is astonishingly effective over time. 4. Log 1 synchronicity per day in a dedicated notebook. Date, place, sensation. After a week, read them aloud to yourself and look for threats. This builds the observational muscle the Council values. Do these things without magical expectation. They are small engineering choices that alter probabilities, not guaranteed routes to transcendence. Now, the matter of public perception. As disclosure continues, you will encounter critics, mockery, and misunderstanding. That is inevitable and not a reflection on the validity of your lived experience. Respond with curiosity rather than defensiveness. Practice describing your experience in functional terms. I've been noticing changes in my decision-making and emotional range, rather than metaphysical jargon when the audience is skeptical. Your capacity to translate the experience into ordinary language is itself a stabilizing skill that helps you hold the grid without causing social rupture. We should address temptation as well. The temptation to feel special, superior, or above ordinary ethical constraints.
Selection is not a license. The Council chose you to serve, not to dominate. Spiritual pride dissolves the field you are meant to hold. Keep humility as a practice. Daily tasks of service without spectacle, listening before speaking, and allowing others autonomy. Let your stabilizing presence be invisible sometimes. The most effective nodes are often unnoticed by the public because their work is relational and practical. As the grid expands, practical roles will emerge. Networkers who connect resources, caregivers who master somatic containment, communicators who translate Council language into usable terms, organizers who cultivate safe clusters. None of these roles require perfection. They require willingness, accountability, and consistent practice. Identify where your capacities naturally edge and volunteer in small, contained ways. The Council's method values reliability over intensity. Before we close, a reminder on safety. If you experience extreme psychological distress, intrusive thoughts, or medically concerning symptoms, seek professional emergency help. Spiritual work can amplify internal experience. It does not replace psychiatric care. If you are unsure whether your experience is transpersonal or clinical, consult both a trusted mental health professional and a mentor in the field. Hold both processes in parallel rather than choosing one over the other. Finally, integration has an arc. Early stages feel like turbulence. Mid-stages feel like calibration. Later stages feel like steady functionality. The shift the Council engineered is toward distributed, resilient nodes. Humans who, in ordinary moments, hold higher coherence so that collective possibilities change. That is why they moved from observer to integrator, because embodied anchors are the most reliable agents of sustained field change. If you sense resonance and want supported practice, consider the member circle as one practical option for continued integration. If you join, you will find structured transmissions, peer cohorts, and integration sessions designed with practical safeguards and ethical accountability. If you do not join, your role remains vital. Continue with the small practices previously described and seek community where it feels safe. We end not with drama, but with a simple orientation. Be steady. Your willingness to show up, to practice small stabilizing choices, to honor boundaries, and to seek help when needed is the core of what the Council needs. This is not about heroism, it is about fidelity to presence. If you feel called to anchor now, you may speak, write, or hold the phrase, "I accept my place as a study field." Do so once with consent to yourself. Then perform a small validating action. Send a supportive message, water a plant, put on a song that grounds you. Let the practice be ordinary. You were chosen because you were possible. You were tuned because you could be trusted to hold steadiness amid change. The Arcturian Council's shocking new direction is not spectacle, it is strategic integration. Your life's accelerations and alignments were not accidents. They were preparations for a quieter, more sustainable work, to be a living node that recalibrates the world one ordinary act at a time. If this transmission landed and you want structured support, there is a protected field available for those who choose deeper work, a member circle that offers transmissions, integration sessions, and practical timeline workshops. The circle is a resource, not a requirement. If you join, expect ethical facilitation, clear boundaries, and a commitment to complement clinical care when needed. Close your eyes, breathe into the center of your chest, and feel the soft steadiness that is becoming available. Remember, your consent matters, pace matters, community matters. You are not alone in this grid. You are one of many who will, through small, consistent acts, change the texture of what is possible. Be steady, be ordinary, be faithful to the small practices that hold a field. We are not finished revealing. There will be more guidance, more protocols, more small invitations. For now, carry this line with care. You were chosen to hold, not to be a spectacle. Your work is simple and profound. Stabilize, transmit, and keep the boundary. The grid is mapping through ordinary choices, and you are already inside it.